I have your attention. Hello? Is that on? Can you hear me? Okay. The July 12th, 2022 Liquor Board hearing is now in session. We'll deal with the minutes. The board now has all meetings transcribed, which serves as minutes of the hearings. The board keeps such minutes stored electronically, and they're available to review by calling the board for an appointment. I now make a motion that the transcripts of the previous board hearing held on June 28th, 2022, be accepted as the board minutes for that date, and I ask for a second.
A second.
It is second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The motion is carried. Now I'll turn it over to Mr. Praley for some comments.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everybody. My name is Jimmy Praley. I serve as counsel to the board. At the beginning of every one of these meetings, I make a few brief announcements. The first is that the commissioners are part-time public servants. They all have other outside interests. When they know they have a conflict of interest, they'll recuse themselves from a case. However, due to the number of people from the public who appear at every meeting, it'd be impossible for each commissioner to know whether he or she has a conflict. So if you believe that a commissioner or more than one commissioner, as the case may be, has a conflict with your case, you need to announce that when your case is called, and then we'll address it accordingly. If not, we'll move forward under the assumption that there are no conflicts. Second, for the sake of judicial economy, this board's rules and regulations provide that in the event that objections are made as to the admissibility of evidence or testimony, the chairman can designate the authority to rule on those objections to counsel. The chairman has given me that authority, so in the event that objections are made, the chairman will turn to me. I will rule on the objection rather than asking the chairman for his input, which will save us all some time. With that, I will turn it over to our Chief Inspector, Wayne Harris, who can call the first case. Chief Inspector Harris, please.
Thank you, Mr. Praley. Our first case is Staples Corner Liquors, Staples Corner Liquors, LLC. Javadi Bazar, managing member. Amar Ajay Bazar.
Reading.
Thank you, Mr.
Helps things out tonight.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to testify for and against, please remain standing and raise your right hand. Thank you.
Anybody else? You can just stand.
Just stay right there. Just raise your right hands.
You solemnly declare and affirm without penalty of perjury, testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start. My name is Wayne Harris. I'm the Chief Inspector for the Anne Arundel County Liquor Board, 2011D, Commerce Park Drive, Annapolis.
Detective Middleton, Anne Arundel County Police Department, currently assigned to Western District.
Detective Charles Cepeda, Anne Arundel County Police Department, Western District.
Liam Benton, Liquor Board Inspector for Anne Arundel County, Commerce Park.
And good evening, Brian Lyman, L-Y-M-A-N, attorney on behalf of the licensee.
Jyoti Bhavsar, I'm the licensee.
Get your address.
2306 Turnbridge Court, Crofton, Maryland, 21114.
More about. More Bhavsar, and my address is 3907 Amblin Corner.
Is that microphone working?
I don't believe it's on.
Not right.
Okay. Let's try one more time.
My name is Amar Bhavsar, and my address is 3907 Amblin Corner, Bowie, Maryland, 20716.
And I'll have the other witnesses who swore the oath identify themselves when their testimony begins, if we call them.
That's fair. All right. Thank you, Mr. Lyman. Procedurally, we have several different reports that are being addressed tonight, so we're going to take each report in line, and we're going to do that chronologically. So I would ask that Detective Middleton to please give the statement of facts regarding the incident on June 7, 2020.
Actually, Mr. Praley, I have another preliminary matter.
Sure, absolutely.
And this actually concerns the whole series and sequence of the way that these citations were presented to the licensee. The licensee's first alleged violation is on the 7th day of June 2022. There's another alleged violation on the 16th of June 2022. And then the final violation is on June 27th, 2022. However, I'll proffer that the licensee was not notified herself of any of these violations until Mr. Benton actually left a report with the staff at the store. In that report, it's alleged that Mr. Benton spoke to the chairman personally before deciding what citations to issue. I don't know the extent of the chairman's discussions. I don't know what Mr. Benton told the chairman, but I would like to raise for the record that the chairman potentially may be a witness here, and I would ask that the chairman counsel with the board's counsel about whether he should recuse himself from the hearing of these citations based on whatever discussions he may or may not have had with staff members. The reason I bring this up is because the board itself sits in a quasi-judicial capacity and makes findings of fact, has to judge witness credibility, and to the extent that the chairman himself was involved in the charging decisions, it may be more prudent for the board to proceed without the chairman considering the allegations at issue tonight.
Understood. Well, with that, we're going to go off the record for a minute so I can consult with the chairman.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Prelli.
All right, Mr. Lemon, the chairman is going to remain on this, and he's not going to recuse himself from it.
Thank you, Mr. Prelli.
Thank you.
I don't have any other preliminary matters. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks. Go ahead, Detective. I'm sorry? Detective Spetta, can you please give us the statement of facts for the June 7th incident? Detective?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
On June 6th, June 7th, 2022, approximately 9:28 p.m., Detective Middleton, Sergeant White, and I were working Operation Save, conducting alcohol sales compliance checks of retail businesses. Redirected a confidential source, 20 years of age, to enter the Staples Corner liquor store located at 1334 Defense Highway, Suite A as in Alpha. It's in Gambles, Maryland, Anne Arundel County. We observed a confidential source enter the business. Confidential source went into the establishment and picked out a 6-pack of Miller Lite beer and took it to the front counter. The CS was given official Anne Arundel County funds and was able to purchase the Miller beer alcoholic beverage from the clerk. The clerk did not ask the CS or the confidential source for identification. The confidential source stated that his ID was out in the vehicle and started to leave the store. The clerk then stated that's okay and sold the alcoholic beverage to the confidential source without seeing his identification. The confidential source exited the business and immediately turned over the alcoholic beverage to myself and Detective Middleton. I know through my training, knowledge, and experience that Miller Lite beer is an alcoholic beverage. Detective Middleton and I then entered the establishment, identified ourselves as police officers, and subsequently identified the clerk as Amir Bavasar, date of birth of January 22nd, 2022. Mr. Bavasar was visibly upset and stated, "I made a mistake." He was polite and cooperative, and he also advised that he has been working there for approximately 1 year and has had the alcohol awareness training. A photograph was taken of Mr. Bavasar and the Miller Lite beer. The beer was subsequently destroyed. A copy of the Anne Arundel County liquor license was properly displayed inside the establishment. A copy of this report will also be forwarded to the Anne Arundel County Liquor Board. This case is closed. Let it be noted that the confidential source's identity was verified by his MVA record.
All
That's
right,
all.
thank you, Detective Spada. Mr. Lyman, any questions?
Yeah, Officer Saveda? Yes. Is that, I'm sorry, I might have botched your title already.
That's okay.
Is it officer, detective?
Detective Cepeda's fine.
Detective, I apologize. You stated that the clerk was polite and cooperative, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Did you observe any other individuals in the store during the time when you were on the premises?
When we were inside, there was also a sales clerk.
Okay, so there was another sales clerk on the premises?
Yes, he was much older, though.
Okay. And did you observe your confidential source buy the alcohol from Mr. Bobstar, Amar Bobstar?
Through the window, and he also gave after he exited the store, he also gave a full description of the sales clerk.
Okay, so your confidential source gave you a complete description?
Yes, sir.
Okay, but that's not identified in your report, correct?
No, but it is stated now.
Okay, and from where was your vantage point that you observed Mr. Bobstar sell the alcohol to the confidential source?
From the front parking lot, parked in front.
Okay, and what vehicle were you parked in?
It was a black Ford Explorer.
Is it marked or unmarked?
It's unmarked. Tinted windows.
And were all four of you gentlemen in that vehicle when you arrived at Staples Corner?
No. I was a secondary vehicle. The CS was with Detective Middleton and Sergeant White.
Okay, and what vehicle were they in?
I can't recall.
Jeep Gladiator.
Jeep Gladiator?
But you couldn't remember that on your own, correct?
No.
Okay,
No, so sometimes our detectives change vehicles.
fair enough. And are you the officer who wrote this report?
No, sir.
Okay, who authored the report, if you know?
Detective Middleton?
Okay. Did you review it before it was submitted?
Yes.
Okay, did you have any corrections to Detective Middleton's report before it was submitted?
No, I did not.
Okay, so the quoted words in here that appear in quotations, Mark, actually were not listened to by you from the confidential source, or was that Detective Middleton who listened to this?
No, we
quoted
were
words?
actually inside the store together, and that's when he said that he was, he was visibly upset and said he was sorry and had the alcohol awareness training and worked there approximately 1 year.
Okay.
Yeah, we were both in the store.
Did you have any interaction with the charging of the violations that are at issue as a result of this incident?
Yes.
Okay,
I
so
was
you,
inside the store, yes.
well, no, but did you consult with the board or decide which actual rules or statutes might have been violated?
No, it was with Detective Middleton.
Okay, so Detective Middleton made those decisions?
No, we just submit the
We
report
just went
to
to
the
the
board.
report,
I see.
yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out why it was that we have 4 violations charged here. If you know any of those reasons, can you explain them?
We just submit the report to the board, and they make a determination of the appropriate charges.
Okay.
Or violations.
So you can't shed any light on why it is that section or rule 3.14C is a charge violation? That's the 3rd violation.
I'd have to defer to the board for that.
Okay. How about section 4.16? Do you know why that section was charged as a violation?
I have to defer to the board. Or the commissioner.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. Did you observe any conduct during your interaction with the clerk or anybody at the store that was contrary to any federal, state, or local statute, laws, rules, regulations, or ordinance, or against the public peace, safety, health, welfare, quiet, or morals?
Yeah, they didn't ask for identification for the sale of the alcohol.
Okay. But that's the extent of the illegal conduct that your report...
That's allegedly all I observed, yes, sir.
Okay, is that all you observed, or allegedly all you observed?
That's all I observed.
Okay. And you, from your training as a law enforcement officer, aside from the sale of alcoholic beverages to a minor, is there any other item that might disturb the public peace, safety, health, welfare, quiet, or morals?
Nothing this incident.
Okay. Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lyman. Mr. Chairman, any questions about this specific incident, the June 7th?
I have no questions at this
Commissioner
time.
Duffy, any questions at this point on this specific incident?
No question.
Commissioner Snoops?
No questions.
Okay. All right, Mr. Lyman, unless you have anything further, we'll move to the next report on this specific incident. Of course, I'll give you an opportunity to present your case in mitigation.
You don't want me to present a defense on this set
I
of
was going to let
facts?
you do it all at once unless you think it's easier to do it this way. It's completely up to you. I figured you were going to be calling witnesses, so we could just...
Well, I mean, there are different defenses to the different factual
Okay,
scenarios.
all right,
so
all right. Well, then we'll let you go on this one then. If it's, if
That's
it
fine.
makes-
I don't mean to make a problem.
No,
or
it's,
to
I want to make it
confuse
as
things.
clear as, I want to make it as clear as we can be for the record and sequentially order these. So
Okay.
if you have any witnesses that you'd like to call, you can present your case in mitigation at this point.
Okay, so here's the circumstances, is that my client is inclined to admit violations 1 and 2, the service of alcohol to an underage person. However, we don't understand and wish to dispute the third and the fourth charges, which are employees, section 3.14C, which under the board's rule says no person under age of 21 may act as a package good clerk. A person 16 years of age or older may work as a stock clerk stocking alcoholic beverages. And then the illegal conduct section seems to be a catch-all, but it's right after a bunch of sort of moralistic guidelines about appropriate acts in section 4. I'll spare the board what its rules say about all of the illegal conduct before 4.16 because it gets a little graphic. But we're still uncertain as to what the specific acts are that led to the charging of 4.16. So they would offer a dispute on those two violations, but are willing to admit and be heard in mitigation on violations 1 and 2.
Okay.
Is that clear enough?
Sure.
Okay. Let me just say to the board that my clients are embarrassed about being here, especially Ms. Bavsar. She appeared here earlier this year to be granted the sole licensee privilege before the board. And her brother, Amar, was to be acting at this store as a stock clerk, and that was the ostensible purpose for him being there during the month of June. His father also was scheduled to be there. As the board might recall from our prior presentations, AJ Bavsar, Amar's father, grew up in India and had polio, and he is not able-bodied and not able to act as a stock clerk at the store. That's created some scheduling difficulties for the owners and for my client, JT Bavsar, who's the licensee before this board. And she is regretful and sorry that this circumstance happened. However, as I alluded to, the officers that evening on the 7th did not leave any indicia of the violation, and she did not know of the violation, and that's another one of Amar's mistakes. And we don't have a good excuse for Amar's actions. My understanding is that Amar's father was actually in the car, and so he was on a phone call in the car, and Amar should have called him back into the store to deal with a customer and to potentially make the sale. He didn't. I don't have a good explanation for why that happened. It was a mistake. However, there was a pretty significant delay in the licensee actually finding out about this that I think has kind of aggravated the circumstances and led to the charging of all these violations. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But on this violation, Amar sold the alcohol to an underage person. Sadly enough, he's been alcohol trained, he is supposed to know the rules, and he did not comply with his instructions from his employer. And it's been tough on their family. Amar has been terminated from his employment at the store, and he is no longer allowed on the premises. That's a policy that his sister has instituted in order to take the appropriate steps to comply with the law and this board's rules and regulations. The further fallout remains to be seen, obviously, but Amar made some judgment choices that were not correct, and I would ask him to describe, in his words, what happened that evening on June 7th.
So on June 7th, when the customer came in, my dad stepped out of the store to have a phone call, and as soon as he came up to the counter, I asked for his ID, which I know I should, as a stock clerk, my job is to just stock in the store, and I was not supposed to do that, take a customer. And I don't know what I was going through. I decided to take care of the customer, and I feel really guilty of the situation, and I'm really sorry. And I've lost my job. I've lost my trust with the family.
Thank you, Mark. Before we get to the sort of defenses, I think JT would like to address the board and explain sort of her perspective and the circumstances of how this incident on the 7th happened in the first instance.
Yes, I'm currently pregnant, and I also have a 1-year-old at home. So the past month has just been really busy with his appointments, my appointments. So because of that, I haven't been able to be at the store 100%. But I've always made sure that there was somebody working at the register at the store with Amar while he was working as a stock clerk. But I just wasn't aware of when these situations happen. I want to let the commissioners know that if the liquor board would have sent me some sort of notice before about the first situation, I wouldn't have let it escalate to this far. But since, to make it better, I've terminated his employment, and I've hired 3 other employees. They're Somil, Didi, and Amit. They've all been tip certified, and they've been working at the store. So I just want to say that this store is everything. This business is everything. I've put all of my money, everything into it. I've even borrowed money from family and friends, to make it work. If something were to happen, I not only that if the store were to even be shut for one day, not just that I wouldn't be able to, repay. It would be very hard with expenses, and just monthly rent is $12,000 a month. But I do want to point to the commissioners that ever since, to make it better, I have hired new employees. I've made sure Amar's no longer going to be there. So I've taken steps to make sure that these violations or such matters don't happen in the future. So please be in consideration of that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Bhavsar. And again, I just reiterate that on charges 3 and 4, from the licensee's perspective, we have difficulty kind of understanding exactly what the operative facts are in the report that led to these particular charges, in addition to charges 1 and 2, which we have admitted, especially the 4th. I can certainly see how the board could interpret, the sale by Amar as acting as a package good clerk. However, his ostensible purpose for being there was not to act as a package good clerk, and he did have his father, who actually whose presence was confirmed by the officer, come back into the store during their interaction right after the violation occurred. That's what we've got on the first 4 charges. Thank you, Commissioners, and Mr. Pirelli.
All right, thank you, Mr.
Let me
Lund.
just make a comment. I think both 3 and 4 not only go to the fact that he was just a stock clerk, but he was selling under the age of 21, which is part of 3 and 4. I don't know the details, but that's pretty much where those 2 came from.
All right, well, at this point, we'll turn it over to the commissioners to see if they have any questions. Mr. Chairman, do you have any questions of Mr. Lyman or the licensee or the clerk at the time?
I don't have any questions. Thank you for your testimony.
Commissioner Duffy, any questions at this point?
No questions.
All right, Commissioner Snoops, any questions?
No questions.
Okay. All right, well, with that, we'll turn over and we'll go to the next incident dated June 16th, 2022. Detective Middleton, are you going to present the statement?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks.
All right, good evening, Detective Middleton again, Anne Arundel County Police. This incident was on June 16th, 2022, approximately 8:45 p.m. Detective Mount Council and I were working Operation Save, conducting alcohol sales compliance checks of retail businesses. We directed a confidential source, 20 years of age, to enter Staples Corner Liquors at 1334 Defense Highway, Suite A, as an Alpha in Gambrills, Anne Arundel County, Maryland. We observed the confidential source enter the business. CS went to the store, picked out a six-pack of Miller Lite beer, took it to the front counter. The clerk did ask the CS for identification. The CS stated that his ID was out in the vehicle and left the store. We observed the clerk, who I had personal knowledge from about 2 weeks prior, from being out there on another check where we had a violation, and he was the clerk that was behind the counter. We were parked out front, and it's a strip mall right there, and we could observe in the front store, see the cash register, the clerk standing behind there. The CS, after he left, the clerk, who we identified as Amar Bavasar, took the six-pack of Miller Lite and walked it back and put it back in the cooler, and then walked back up and stood back behind the cash register. We observed that from outside in the vehicle. Like I said, being already familiar with Mr. Amar from the prior investigation from Anne Arundel County Police 22-719-986, after that case, I actually hand-delivered the report to the liquor board, and at that point, I was told by the liquor administrator that Mr. Bavasar was only 20 years of age, and that, in fact, was a violation in itself. So that's how I became familiar with that as a violation. So when we were out this night and witnessed that, I attempted to call the Chief Liquor Inspector, Wayne Harris, on a cell phone. We stood out in the parking lot in the vehicle for several minutes, did not see anyone else in the store, any other employees, at which time Chief Inspector Harris called me back on my cell phone. We advised him of the situation, and he advised me that we should document it as a violation, being that he was the only clerk in the store under the age of 21, and that he was at the register when our confidential source attempted to buy the alcohol. So I documented it on a police report and submitted it to the liquor board, and that would be my statement of facts.
All right. Thank you, Detective Middleton. Mr. Lyman.
Detective Middleton, in fact, no alcohol was sold to your confidential source, is that correct? And did you or anybody besides the confidential source enter the establishment to inquire about whether there was any other person on the premises?
No, we did not.
You only observed from the parking lot, correct?
Correct.
Did you exit your vehicle?
No.
So all of your observation was done from inside your vehicle?
Correct.
And that night, what vehicle were you in?
Ford Explorer.
And that's a police vehicle?
Yes, unmarked.
And therefore, you didn't give any notice to anyone in the store that you'd made these observations, correct?
Correct.
I'm going to pass you a series of photographs. Does that look familiar to you? Can you identify that location?
Yeah, this is the front of the store, of the Staples Corner Liquor Store.
Okay. And you'd agree with me that there are a significant amount of posters plastered over the windows, correct?
In this picture, it depicts that, yes.
Okay. Was that the circumstance when you visited on the night of the 16th?
Now, we were parked farther over to the right, so if you look at a 45-degree angle, I can actually see Mr. Bavasar standing behind the cash register very clearly. That's how I was able to recognize who he was.
Okay. Can you have a look at that photograph? Is that better depict the angle you're talking about?
Yeah, that's a better angle.
Okay, so you were parked more on the right side of the establishment as you're looking
That's correct.
straight ahead? And do you recall if there were this same number of advertisements or posters on the windows as are depicted in these photographs?
I'll take your word. There are advertisements on the window, but I'm not sure if that's exactly what was up there. But yeah, there were stuff in the window.
Okay,
But it didn't block my view that night.
okay. And could you see to the back of the store?
No, could not.
Okay. How about in the office of the store?
No.
And
I
you
could just observe.
could you tell how many registers there are in the store from your vantage point?
No.
Okay. Do you know how many registers there are in the store?
I believe there's 2.
Okay. There's one in the front of the store and one in the back, correct?
Well, if I remember right, it's like halfway. If you picture the store, when you walk in the front door, there's like an area, and then there's like a little cut through, and then the cash register sits right there. It's kind of in the middle. But I'm not aware of where the other cash register is.
May I hand these up and offer them as licensees Exhibit 1?
Sure, those will be accepted, Mr. Lyman.
Thank you, Mr. Pirelli.
Mr. Lyman, we're going to label them 1A and 1B, if that's all right. 1A will be looking directly into the store, and 1B will be kind of at the angle.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Pirelli. Detective Middleton, can you tell us how many times you've actually been into this establishment? Do you know?
At least twice. The last violation, and then in the prior year or the year before, we had another violation that I was in there. So two that I can confirm.
Okay. And the prior time was just, I think you testified about 2 weeks in advance. I calculate 9 days. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, it was on June 7th.
Okay. And then this event was on June 16th, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Were there any other customers in the store at the time?
No.
And did you take a debriefing from the confidential source?
Yes, I spoke to him, but I saw everything from outside, so it wasn't, asked him if there's anybody else in the store.
Well, my question is, the confidential source told you that he didn't see anybody else in the store. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Did the confidential source also give you a transcript or a replay of who spoke to him?
He advised that Mr. Marr asked him for identification.
Okay. Was this the same confidential source as had been in 9 days before?
Yes.
The same individual?
Yeah, so he's familiar with the clerk.
Okay.
Same clerk.
And because you didn't have any interaction with anybody in the store, there weren't any compliance issues with being polite or cooperative or anything like that, is that correct?
Correct, yeah. We did not go in the store.
How long were you at the store in total? On the evening of the 16th?
Probably 20 minutes.
And what time did you say you arrived at the store?
About 8:45 p.m.
Okay. And so if you arrived at 8:45, you would have departed the store at approximately 9:05? Does that sound correct?
Well, it was probably a total of 20 minutes. We probably were there for about a good 10 minutes before the CS entered the store.
Oh, so the CS actually entered the store Not at 8:45, but at a later time?
Well, it's an approximate. I say in my report, approximate. I don't have, if you have your store video, you can probably give me the exact time he entered the store. But it's an approximate time.
And you said your whole visit there was 20 minutes?
It's approximate, because I know we called the chief liquor inspector, he didn't answer, and we waited for several minutes to see what we were going to do, because we weren't sure whether I was even going to write this as a report yet until I heard back, and then he actually called, we were actually, had already left, and we were heading northbound on Crane Highway when he called. We had already left the establishment, the parking lot.
So you left the parking lot before the chief inspector called you back?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you know what time you left the parking lot?
No.
Okay. And this evening, it was the confidential source, yourself, and who else in the car?
Detective Mountcastle.
Okay. Did your confidential source ride in the back seat and Mountcastle was in the front seat with you?
Yes.
And Detective Mountcastle also would have observed the store through the same window as you?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know if he saw any other individuals in the store?
I don't know. No, I can't testify, but no, he didn't see anybody.
He didn't talk to you about seeing anybody else in the store, correct?
Correct. No, we didn't. We discussed the whole situation. We were before I called the chief inspector, so we did not see anybody else in the store. And I think the main issue that I recognized was that he was the one behind the cash register to make the sale when the CS went up there. So that's why knowing that that was a violation when I dropped off the report the week prior to the administrator. That's the only reason why I was familiar with it.
So your interpretation is that a stock clerk standing behind a register is a violation?
Well, when a CS takes the six-pack of beer to make a purchase and he stands behind the register to ring it up, that would be my observation.
Okay. The violation wasn't him returning the six-pack to the case, was it?
No. I was just testifying that that's how much I could see inside the store. It was night, so like your pictures that you depicted, they're like daytime. So at night, it's a lot brighter. Inside the store, you can see a lot more than you can looking at those pictures that you took. It's not a perfect depiction of what I was looking at.
Okay. No further questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lyman. Mr. Chairman, any questions on this statement of facts?
No questions.
Commissioner Duffy, any questions?
No questions.
Commissioner Snoops?
No questions.
All right, Mr. Lyman, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I'd like to offer the surveillance camera stills that my client retrieved from this date as, I guess it's going to be 2 A, B, and C.
Yep.
And I apologize, I've just got the one copy of those.
That's all right, we'll mark them. And those will be admitted.
And by way of explanation and proffer, those images were obtained from the video camera system, the security system in the store. The first image is the night in question, and it shows Amar's father, A.J. Bavsar, standing behind the counter at 8:55 p.m. The second is from 8:57 p.m., and the next is from 9:01 p.m. After that, I've given the board a chance to review those exhibits. I'm just going to ask Amar to describe what he recalls from that evening on the 16th. Can you describe what happened that night, Amar?
Well, as I recall, I'm
I'm sorry, sir. Could you speak up a little bit? The rain, we can. The
well,
deluge is tough.
as I recall, I'm not sure who came in or what I might have done, but as of I know, my dad has always been with me working, and he's been the one running the register.
Thank you, Mar. And if I may be heard an argument, again, this is a circumstance where the licensee was not notified of the alleged violation at the time of the alleged violation. Even Amar Bhavsar was not notified of the alleged incident. We have testimony by hearsay only from Detective Middleton that his confidential source spoke with Amar. We don't have that in firsthand testimony. And you've been provided the video images showing an appropriate aged clerk in AJ Bhavsar standing at the register, I think in the location that Detective Middleton was describing that he could observe through the window. Frankly, I know this is an administrative proceeding, but this wouldn't come close to proving that this incident occurred beyond a reasonable doubt if it were a criminal court of law. Fundamentally, the board needs to look at the fairness to the applicants or to the licensee here and determine whether or not having the officers send in a confidential source, have the confidential source give some sort of interaction with whoever seems to be in the store, whatever position they were in the store, and then speculating as to he was asked for ID and then the sale didn't happen. Frankly, Amar doesn't recall. Now, I get it. Amar does not have the best credibility in front of this board. Amar has previously admitted his mistake in the first instance. And in this instance, however, we don't have sufficient evidence to show the board that the individual was actually acting as a packaged good clerk and not a stock clerk. And I think that's the problem with these charges on 5 and 6. Amar is allowed to be in the store. He's certainly allowed to be in the store as a stock clerk under the board's own rules under 3.14C, which specifically allows him to act as a stock clerk. And there's also an exception for him being on the premises under the board's rule 14.01D number 2, which says he can be there for purposes of employment. So fundamentally, I think what the officers observed from outside the windows is insufficient to find a violation in this instance based on these facts.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lyman. I'm going to see if
you.
the commissioners have any questions regarding this one of either the clerk or any.
Yeah, if you could just clarify those photos of your dad, of his father.
Sure.
Again.
So the person that's shown in those photos is the overhead camera, and the date in question is shown on the screen on the top of that photo above Mr. Bhavsar's head, somewhere in that vicinity.
Got it.
And it shows the date and the time that those were taken. It lists the 16th. I believe this is a Thursday evening, 9 days prior or after the prior Tuesday violation that we just admitted. And the timestamp that was made by the video system clearly shows that perhaps there was an overlap. Perhaps Detective Middleton and Mountcastle should have been looking a little closer through the window, and they certainly would have seen AJ Bhavsar standing there at the register at 7:50 or 8:55, which is the timestamp on that photograph. That's why I asked that series of questions of Detective Middleton, because if they were there for 20 minutes, then they should have observed the overlap of maybe Amar being behind the counter at some time, and then certainly those photographs show that it's AJ Bhavsar, his father, who was standing behind the register within 10 minutes of their arrival time that he testified to as being 8:45 approximately.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Chairman?
No other questions.
Commissioner Duffy, any questions?
Yes, Mr. Lyman, in reference to the timestamp, Corporal Middleton was stated that this was only approximately time. There it was, we are identifying actual time. So with approximately time between 8:45 and 8:55, there's a lap of 10 minutes. So is there a possibility that someone, they could move and make an exchange during that time?
I think absolutely there's that possibility, Mr. Duffy, but I would ask the board to not ask for speculation, and frankly, that's what we're left with, is speculating about what exactly the time was when Detective Middleton's confidential source went into the store, what his actual testimony might be, because he has not appeared here to testify and answer questions about his interaction with the clerk before the board, and the licensee has presented her evidence, the evidence from her video system that shows over the span of that 20-minute period when Detective Middleton testified that they were at the store and observing the store beginning at 8:45 approximately. 10 minutes into that time, there's a photograph of, it's not Amar, it's pretty clear from that photograph, I think that's self-evident that it's not Amar there, it's his father, AJ, who's actually here tonight and can testify about him being present at the store that evening, although neither of them have a specific recollection of dealing with the customer because there was no interaction with the liquor board staff or with the detectives to make them think that anything out of the ordinary has happened. It was an attempted sale, and the sale did not go through, and Amar, as a stock clerk, returned a six-pack to the cooler. This happens in liquor stores across the county on a daily basis, I have no doubt.
So we can take from your question of Corporal Middleton that your question in reference to his handling the alcohol, which he said that he did not return to the cooler.
Well, Mr. Bobsar, Amar, I presume, did return the alcohol to the cooler because that's his job. Okay. His father walks with crutches and cannot take a six-pack from the countertop to the cooler. That's why Amar was to be there when his father was scheduled to be on shift, was to restock and move the stock in a liquor store. The stock in a liquor store, it's heavy. It's liquid-filled containers, and his father simply does not have the physical capacity to work in that capacity, to even move a six-pack to the cooler.
Okay. Fine.
Commissioners?
No more questions.
Sorry, Commissioner Duffy.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy.
Do you have any questions?
No, I have no questions.
All right. Mr. Lyman, you want to add anything before we move on to the June 27th incident?
I would just note that this incident of observing an establishment without interacting with the establishment's staff and the licensee potentially, or their agents inside the store at the time, it seems to be a little out of the standard practice in my experience before the board. And I would just note that typically, if there is a violation, that immediate notice is given to the licensee, or at least there's some interaction to put them on notice to save the evidence in relation to whatever that circumstance was. It was just by happenstance that Ms. Bobsar's video system had enough memory on it that we had the images from this alleged violation on the 16th, but she didn't pay for the extra data to store the data back from the original violation on June 7th that she didn't actually know about. Just fundamentally speaking, in a question of fairness, I think it's fair that the board and that the police force and the staff promptly, for lack of a better term, make an effort to notify the licensees and their staff members of alleged violations in proximity to when they occur. I certainly understand there's logistical challenge in having reports written up, deciding what charges would be brought, but in this case, we've got a span of 20 days before the licensee had noticed that there was going to be a violation from the first incident, let alone the second incident where there was no interaction with the police officers at all on the night in question on the 16th.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lyman. All right. Well, with that, we will turn over to the third matter, the third incident, June 27th, 2022, and I would ask for Inspector Ben to read the statement of charges, please.
I do have a small correction to my report. I don't know if I should just read the report through and then
You can note your correction in the report when you read it for the record.
Okay. Just up front, the person I spoke to that day was not JT, even though that's what they told me when they signed the violation. It was
Okay.
actually Mr. Yogesh Patel that I confirmed when I served the summons
Okay.
2 days later.
All right, thank you.
At 4:10 PM on June 27, 2022, this inspector entered the establishment to purchase margarita mix. Upon approaching the counter, I noticed that only Amar, who is known to me as being under 21, is the only one in the store. I confronted him, and he confirmed this. He called Mr. Patel, his boss, and both he and I spoke to Mr. Patel. I told them that I would be back in 10 minutes after I dropped my son off and grabbed my violation book. After leaving, I spoke to Judy, Chairman Maloney, and Chief Inspector Harris, who all told me to write a violation. Chief Harris told me what to violate them with, 3.02, 4.01D, and 4.16. I re-entered Staples Corner at 4:25 PM and spoke with Mr. Patel. He said that they are short-staffed and he has a baby on the way and asked me not to violate them. I told him that this was the third time Amar had been caught behind the counter. I filled out the violation notice number 1226 and gave Mr. Patel a copy. I told Mr. Patel that they are on our radar and we will be watching. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Benton. Mr. Lyman, any questions?
Let's start with why you thought that Yogesh Patel was JT Patel. Can you explain that?
Yeah, when I came back and had them sign the violation, I had, who we now know as Mr. Yogesh Patel, sign the violation. And when he did, it's quite illegible, so I asked him his name, and he told me JT Babasar.
Okay. Did you ask him his name, or did you ask him if he was signing on behalf of the licensee? Do you know?
I asked him his name.
Okay. And he told you his name was JT?
He told me to put JT Babasar, yes.
Okay. Did you explain to him that you were serving him a violation for the licensee?
I explained to him that we were serving them a violation for the following violations.
Okay. Have you met JT Babsar, my client,
Yes.
before? Mm-hmm. Okay. So she should have been known to you as the licensee, correct?
Yes, so we met when she took over. I stepped outside.
Okay. And yet, when you wrote this report, you knew you were dealing with a man and not with Ms. Babsar, correct?
Correct.
And yet, you wrote your whole report that says JT everywhere in your report and refers to him as he, correct?
Correct.
Okay. How did you know this was the third time Amar had been caught behind the counter?
I was informed by our staff at the liquor board. They asked us to take a closer look because they kept finding Amar behind the counter.
Okay. And in your training experience, is that a per se violation of the board's rules and regulations to have a stock clerk behind the counter?
When I say behind the counter, I mean selling alcohol, behind the register, using the register.
All right. But in your report, you didn't say using the register or anything. You said behind the counter, correct?
Correct.
When you spoke to Judy Hagner at the liquor board, how long was that conversation?
Maybe 2 minutes.
Okay. And this was after work hours, is that correct?
It was approximately 4:15 p.m.
Okay. And doesn't the liquor board staff leave the office at approximately 4 o'clock?
I believe so.
Okay. Did you call her at the office or on her cell phone?
I called her at the office.
Okay. How about Chairman Maloney? How did you contact him when you spoke to him?
I contacted him on his cell phone.
Okay. And how long was that conversation?
Less than a minute.
Okay. And for Chief Inspector Harris, how did you contact him?
So the reason I contacted the other two is because I thought Chief Inspector Harris was still on vacation. When I contacted Chief Inspector Harris, that was maybe 2 minutes, 3 minutes at the most.
Right, the question was, how did you contact Chief Inspector
Oh, I'm
Harris?
sorry, on his cell phone.
Okay, so you called Chief Inspector Harris on his cell phone?
Yes.
And then I think you just testified that you talked to him for 2 or 3 minutes, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And he instructed you to write 3 violations and gave you the actual rule numbers of the board's rules, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Did he give you any rationale or any description of why it was 3.02, 3.01D, or I'm sorry, 4.01D and 4.16?
Yes.
Okay. Can you describe what the rationale was for violating on 3.02?
The cooperation is because we've notified them that Amar cannot be at the register selling, and they were failure to cooperate with that. 4.01D is because he is a minor at the register selling. And 4.16 illegal conduct is also because he is a minor at the register selling.
Okay, but it's only one factual instance that you observed him at the register selling, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Did you check the store for any other people there present in the store?
Yes, there was another gentleman waiting in line behind me.
Okay, but there was no other staff that you observed?
No, and I asked Amar, and he confirmed that nobody else was there.
Okay. Do you recall talking to Mr. Yogesh Patel on the telephone
Yes.
while you were at the store?
Yes.
Can you describe to the board what was discussed?
We discussed Amar being the only one there and therefore being the only one able to sell alcohol. Mr. Patel said, I told him that I didn't have my violation book with me, so I'd have to check and get back to him as to whether I would be violating them, but I said that, this is serious. He said, he'd be back in 5 to 10 minutes, and please, have some consideration. We talked about the other 2 incidents, just that it had happened twice before, and he said they only knew of one.
Okay. And so that happened at 4:10 when you were in the store originally, correct?
Approximately.
Okay. Did you purchase alcohol from Amar that day?
No, I just purchased a mixer.
Oh, so it was not an alcoholic beverage, correct?
No, but then I watched him sell to the man behind me.
Oh, but that's not in your report, is it?
No, it's not.
What did he sell to the man behind you?
Bottle of clear liquor, a handle.
Is there a reason you left that out of your report?
This is my first violation. Didn't know I should put it in.
So Amar sold you margarita mix, correct?
Correct.
And when you returned to the store, was Amar the only one there still?
No.
Who else?
Yogesh was there.
Yogesh Patel was there?
Yeah.
I'm still confused about why you thought that Yogesh Patel was JT Bhavsar. Do you have anything else to add to that?
I asked him specifically his name, and that's what he told me. If I look at the management agreement, there's a AJ, there's a JT. I don't know. He said J, and I'm going to go with what he tells me is his name.
It couldn't have been that he thought you were asking for the licensee's name, who is signing on behalf of?
I asked him his name.
Okay. How long have you been a liquor inspector?
A little over a year.
And how many establishments are you responsible for primarily inspecting and making reports upon?
28.
And how long have you been an inspector for Staples Corner Liquors?
Since May of 2021.
Okay. And have you had any other issues, to your knowledge, for Staples Corner Liquors prior to this series of incidents in June 2022?
Nothing that I've violated them for, no.
Okay. Things that you reminded them about or didn't violate them for? Anything like that?
Yeah, moving boxes out of the way of the emergency exit, making sure there weren't boxes behind their small bar there. Normal things in the course of an inspection.
Okay. But nothing worthy of actually writing a violation for previously, correct?
No, not for a first warning, no.
Okay. Have you given them any warnings previously? Any documents or anything called a warning?
No.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's on their inspection sheets. When they get an inspection, they have warnings at the, as part of the inspection
Okay.
for those things.
Thank you, Mr. Benton. I don't have any further questions.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lyman. Mr. Chairman, any questions for the inspector?
No questions.
Commissioner Duffy?
No questions.
Commissioner Snoops, any questions? No questions. All right, Mr. Lyman, we'll turn it over to you to present your case with respect to this incident.
Thank you. I'm going to have JT describe the circumstances that led to this incident. Would you like me to ask you specific questions, or do you want to give the board a summary of what happened on the 27th?
I think questions would be better, so we
Okay.
can.
Who was supposed to be working in that afternoon on the 27th at Staples Corner Liquors?
The 27th was Amar, and like I mentioned earlier, we hired 3 new employees. One of them, which was Dee Dee, she was working that day as well.
Okay. And how long had Dee Dee been hired and on the payroll for you?
She had just been hired. I believe it was just her second day that day.
Okay. And what happened after that, if you know?
So I wasn't there, so I'm not sure. I think if you can call Dee Dee, she would
Okay.
be a better person to explain.
Dee Dee, could you come up, please?
No.
Yeah, we're just going to need your name and address for the record when you get up here.
Sure.
My address?
Name,
good
full name
evening.
and address, please.
Good. 1334 Defense Highway, Gambrills, Maryland, 21054.
Okay, and just your full name, too.
Oh, I'm sorry, Davina Geralds.
Okay, great.
Ms. Geralds, can you describe when you came to work at Staples Corner Liquors in the first place?
Yeah, I had started June 26th, the day before. And the following day, after I got into work, I got a phone call from my babysitter. I take care of my grandchildren. I have 3 of them. They're all 8 and under. And my babysitter had an emergency himself, and he had to leave. I live so very close to, like I just had to run across the street to get to them. And I had to take care of them, so I had to leave the store. It was awful. It was my second day of work, and I didn't know what to do. So it was, they were nice enough to still keep me there, working there. And it was just awful. And I could not be more apologetic to these people.
So, Dee Dee, what shift were you supposed to be working on the 27th?
3 to 10.
Okay, 3 p.m. till 10 p.m.?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And approximately what time did you have to leave the establishment, Staples Corner?
I think it was probably about 3:45, 4 o'clock.
Okay. And who did you notify that you were leaving or had to leave?
Well, of course I called it, and then I called Jay to tell her that I had to run, and they had to run, and that they told me they would get there as soon as possible, and they were only a few minutes away too. So, I mean, it could have only been like 10 minutes.
Okay. And you have not been fired, is that correct?
No.
Okay. Are you Tips and Tams alcohol trained and certified?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And have you had experience serving or selling alcoholic beverages in the past?
Yes, yes.
Can you give the board a brief summary of your experience working in the alcohol-related business?
I've managed 3 different restaurants, Coyote Cafe, Eddie's Place, and a Pizza Hut that all served alcohol. So since I was about 26 years old, and now I'm almost 48.
Okay. Thank you, Dee Dee. I don't have any further questions. I don't know if the board has any questions.
Mr. Chairman, any questions? No questions. Commissioner Duffy, Commissioner Snoops, any questions?
No question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yogesh? Call Mr. Yogesh Patel next.
Mr. Patel, if you could just give us your full name and address for the record, please.
Yogesh Patel, 2306 Turnbridge Court, Crofton, Maryland, 21114.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Lyman.
Mr. Patel, could you describe what happened the afternoon of the 27th that you were a party to and witnessed?
So me and my wife were together, and she was actually taking our son to, one of the appointments, or we were coming back, I think. And she asked me that the situation arose, and she asked me to go to the store and take care of, just watch over until we can figure out what's next. So meanwhile, I was going, Amar calls me and says, the inspector has come, and I spoke with the inspector, and like he said, he told me about the 2 other violations that I did not know of, and I was just like, okay, I'll be there. I asked him not to write anything because I didn't explain him the situation, but we were out. So I get there, and that's it.
All right, and so then Mr. Benton had you sign the citation, is that correct?
Yes. So when he asked me to sign, I understand what he said, but he didn't ask for my name. He asked me to sign. So I signed. And after that, when he said, this is not, are you JD? I said, no, my name is Yogesh. And that's how he got my name. So he thought I was someone else. He thought I was JD. He thought I was the owner, but she's the owner. That's my wife, obviously, but, he just had a misunderstanding.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to add about what happened that afternoon?
No, I think Dee Dee left, and that's pretty much it.
Can you tell me what time you arrived at the establishment, if you can recall?
Yeah, I think I got there around 4:10, 4:15. I'm not sure, but around there. Because it was like 5 minutes after I spoke with the Inspector Liam.
Okay. Thank you. I don't have any further questions. Does the board have any questions for Mr. Patel?
No questions for me.
No question.
No questions.
Okay. And next, I'm going to ask the licensee, Ms. JT, did you give any specific instructions to Amar when Dee Dee had to leave the store?
Yes, I did tell him not wait until either me or Yogesh, because we weren't sure who was going to be there at the time, to wait for us to get there, not to take customers. Obviously, looks like he didn't listen to me, which is why he has lost my trust and he no longer works at the store.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Okay, thank you. No further witnesses, Mr. Lyman?
No further witnesses. Thank you.
Any questions from the commissioners?
No questions.
No questions.
All right, Mr. Lyman, we'll give you the last word.
Thank you. So on these series of 3 violations, again, I think that certainly there is some potential culpability on behalf of the licensees. This is a circumstance where there was a medical emergency that led to the employee who was supposed to be on duty on her second day on the job, leaving the job, and Amar, again, making a poor decision is what it sounds like from the witness testimony to me. Amar knew that he should not be selling alcohol, and it was frankly news to me when Mr. Benton just testified that there was some sale of alcohol in accordance or in violation of the board's rules. I find it curious that was not in Mr. Benton's report in the first instance, and that was also not a charged offense. Frankly, we didn't go back and look in detail at the video circumstances surrounding this particular count. The cooperation violation seems to be a recurring violation in the mind of the charging authority. Maybe that's Chief Inspector Harris, who's advised on these charges. But the cooperation violation has been charged, as well as the illegal conduct violation has been charged for these 3 separate incidents, 3 separate times by my calculation here. So out of those 9 charges, 3 of them are this illegal conduct violation, which is sort of a catch-all. It's a little illusory as to exactly what it is, besides you're just in more trouble than the original trouble you might have been in for the actual factual violation. Fundamentally, I think that if that's going to be a violation, then those 3 charges, the 4.16 violations, ought to be merged because they only arise out of the series of events, it seems to me. This didn't come in to my client as a 2-count violation, as your typical save enforcement, alcohol enforcement violation, which has 2 counts, a violation of the board's rules and a violation of the alcoholic beverages article. We've got a separate charge of section 4.16 of the board's rules. If the board feels like that's an appropriate charge, I would like the board to give some facts for guidance to my client as to what exactly that illegal conduct is. I know that the chairman has spoken at the conclusion of the first 4 charges about that issue, but if the board is going to find that violation, I would ask that the board consider merging all 3 of those illegal conduct violations into one, since it really seems to be a result of the allegations in aggregate as opposed to each individual violation being an aggravated violation of various sorts. As you heard, charges 7 and 8, it's not a complete defense to the charges. We have an employee who has admitted to breaking the rules, breaking his employer's rules on the 7th. We have the employer, his sister, who trusted him foolishly, in retrospect, to abide by the rules of the board and to only act as a stock clerk. And, frankly, in this circumstance, I think that a violation where he did not actually sell any alcohol to the inspector who just came in for a mixer, there wasn't a violation there at that point. He is not acting as a packaged goods store clerk if he only sells non-alcoholic products. He can sell chips, he can sell sodas, he can sell waters and ice. If he does not sell alcohol, he's not acting as a packaged goods store clerk. Now, that's a highly technical argument, but I think that the board would be well served to think about charging 9 violations in a highly technical manner, because that seems to be what's happened here. Fundamentally, I don't think you've got a situation where he was unlawfully on the premises under Rule 4.01D, as is charged for number 7, because he was there in capacity as an employee, and he's allowed to be there as an employee. That's a specific exception under the board's own rules. If you look at the board's rules under 4.01D, D says, no holder of a Class D license shall permit any person on the premises under the age of 21 unless, number 1, accompanied by a parent, spouse, or guardian of any lawful age, and number 2, for employment purposes or for the purposes of providing entertainment. Amar was at the premises on the 27th for employment purposes. He was supposed to be there for employment purposes. He was supposed to be accompanied by a lawfully aged packaged good clerk who had to leave under emergency circumstances. And you heard testimony that an appropriate age replacement clerk was there in 10 or 15 minutes and actually talked to the liquor inspector on the telephone. The flourish that we got tonight from Inspector Benton, I don't know what to say about that other than that's not a violation that has been charged here tonight. And so maybe it's right for a different night if a report gets written and the board wants to issue a violation based on that. But I think the violation needs to be assessed based on the testimony that was elicited and the report that was filed with the board. I understand that Mr. Benton has not had violations before, but his report is particularly bad in comparison to the police officer's report. I pointed out that he didn't seem to know the individual who had signed the citation. He didn't know the licensee. he called both the chairman and Mr. Harris and the board's staff for instructions on what should happen here. And by doing that, he's adding to the factual scenario that's relevant at this hearing. He's expressing facts to Mr. Chairman as a judge in this case. Before we're here with an opportunity to cross-examine, before a charging decision is made by Chief Inspector Harris or the board staff. And again, I think my client is thankful that they got notice of the other violations from Mr. Benton because they really didn't have notice of those other violations until this incident happened on the 27th. And so that's a long and roundabout way of saying that the board, I think, needs to look carefully at the specific facts that have been shown tonight by the witnesses and for the explanations for how these incidents and events occurred. And then it needs to look carefully when it applies its own rules to make sure that it complies with the law that's been established under the board's rules and regulations. Frankly, we admitted the violations that were clear to me as the licensees counsel. And I'm advocating here, but I think that the rest of these charges are frankly over the top. I think they're unfairly targeting my clients in a circumstance where there was a prior violation and there was insufficient notice to the licensee herself in particular before extensive action was taken targeting this store to try to get them on another set of violations. And then the book has been thrown at them. 9 violations over a it's a 3-week period here on 3 separate days. One of the incidents, the officers didn't even come into the store and apprise the licensee that they'd observed anything that they thought was a violation at the time. With that, I would ask the board to, in understanding that the board is tasked with enforcing its rules and regulations and the law, that it do what's fair and that it earnestly consider the explanations and the factual difficulties that have been evidenced by my clients' witnesses, by Ms. Bobsar's sincere and heartfelt explanation to the board about the difficulties she's had here. And in context, is 9 violations and violating on every one of these 9 violations fair in the context of what other enforcement actions have been taken against other licensees historically by this board and the period over which that these violations occurred. I could understand if this was a circumstance where there was a noticed violation on the 7th of June, and then we were back here with another violation sometime in July, and then we were back here in another violation sometime in August, after the board had sent out summonses, sent out notices. But in this circumstance, as I indicated, we didn't even have the video to go back and review the June 7th violation by the time that we got notice on the 27th that there was an alleged violation on the 7th. Clearly, Amar Bavsar is culpable in that first instance. We've admitted to that violation. Amar has a lot of trust to try to rebuild with his family, frankly, and he should have, as a family member, as a brother, as an employee of the store, informed the owner of the store that there was a violation on the 7th. He did not. And Ms. Bobsar is asking the board to do what's fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lyman. All right. If there's nothing further, we'll turn it over to the board for deliberation and a decision. Mr. Chairman.
Oh, how complex it can be. Anyway, just to sort of reiterate and maybe help to clear up a couple of things from our standpoint. Originally, the clerk, as they say, sold liquor to a minor. That's number one on the first offense. He was under 21, behind the counter, ringing up the charge. Confidential source walked out. So that's the charges 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1 and 2 are specifically, and you've agreed to the guilt of that, and then illegal conduct employees were issues that were dealing with the fact that he was under 21 years. And as I remember, when we almost attempted to transfer the license to this gentleman maybe a year ago, I mean, this came up in the discussion of that transfer, that he could work at the store, but he couldn't sell any alcohol beverages there. So that was number one. Number two, we came upon the second violation, where our confidential source went in again. And yes, the time frame was very narrow. And I think, not sure exactly why it was, but the point is that they went in and attempted to sell alcoholic beverages. Obviously, he didn't sell it to a minor, but he did ring up, or was ringing up the sale. One of the officers testified that he looked through the window and saw him behind the counter, the cash register. I understand the photos, timing may not be the perfect thing, but appreciate that. And then lastly, we have the inspector going in, just doing his job, and notices that he's the only one individual in the store. And gentlemen, the inspector does buy a non-alcoholic beverage, but the fact of the matter is that, again, he was back ringing up the orders and the sales. And that's pretty much what we felt as administrators, as a board, that if this continued, I mean, it could go through July and August, basically violating the law. So we brought him in. Now, can we be fair? And I think that obviously the original issue was that he sold to a minor under 21 years of age, and that obviously it's a very serious thing. And the fact is that he should have told the licensee, perhaps, that had happened, but he didn't. That's neither here nor there. And I can understand the frustration you might have had over that, because he is a relative, and you had to end up letting him go, which is basically a shame at this point. But I'm going to quiet down for the moment, and I do recall, or Mr. Lyman, your comments are well taken, and the board wants to be fair here. And we will deliberate and hopefully do that. So I'm going to just take a moment and reflect. Anybody else want to say anything?
Commissioner Duffy, do you have any comments that you'd like to make at this point?
No, I'd just like to comment on Mr. Lyman did a very good representation of the clients in questions and all, and I want to give encouragement to our inspector for going out and doing his job to the best of his ability. And that this is very complex in reference to Mr. Lyman's request, and I understand being fair and partial. I totally understand that. So, again, as the chairman indicated, this deliberation is very, very difficult.
Commissioner
And that's
Stoops.
all.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Duffy.
No, that's it.
Commissioner Stoops, do you have any comments?
I guess my only comment really is that you've taken care of the problem.
Yes, for
And
sure.
I think I would suggest that you never hire anybody under 21. And I know
Not
in this
happening
day and
again.
age
Nope.
That it was really hard. But bottom line is you got to protect the investment.
Yes.
I'm going to make a motion at this time that we, with the sale of the minor under 21 years of age, that we use our current guidelines for first offense, and that would be $350 for each count. In addition to that, I'm going to merge the illegal conduct. There's 3 overall counts there into one, and I'm going to set a fine for $500, plus court costs, and the remaining counts will be dropped. So that's in the form of a motion. I can repeat it if you like. I'm looking for a second or additional discussion.
Can I just clarify? So it's $350 for each count and then,
Correct. That would be 1 and 2.
right, and then $500 for the illegal contact?
Correct.
All. Okay. I second the motion.
Seconded. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, inspectors, officers.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Everybody's excused, and thank you.
Chief Inspector Harris, I'm gonna take a brief recess. A couple
Sure.
minutes.
10
take-
minutes?
Take 5-minute break.
Take 5-minute recess.
Okay. The
5
hearing's-
minutes only.
Hearing's recessed for 5 minutes, and we'll adjourn.
Nobody ever takes a 5-minute break. Okay. We're gone. Well, the storm stopped. Yeah, you're right. Aye. I didn't either. But thank you.
I think this will be not so bad. That was a heck of a storm that came through. Yeah. I parked in some parking lot, like around the corner, underground, so. We're parked in the garage, right, if you go out the door, take a left, get in the garage, but then we went down a level and I ended up like far away. I don't know what I was doing.
How you feeling? You okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Couple minutes, 2-minute warning, excuse me. Continue, John.
I mean, we do ongoing investigations for weeks at a time before we charge anybody. I mean, it's...
Now you know what it's like in case you do
I
have
started to say, you better leave Liam alone.
Don't want to be in that situation.
He did a good job.
I'm carding
Yeah,
everybody.
well, yeah, absolutely.
He just completed his violation awareness training.
Otis might be a minute.
Okay. I told him I'm carding everybody.
Yeah, let me check.
Oh, Otis's sign must have fell down. They got the blue tape. What time is it? It's 7:34. Wow. That was intense. I had a long way for this.
I sent a text. I said all of
He's already setting the agenda. So. No, it sets a good precedence for for a new owner. Yep.
Yeah, we can get started without him.
Hearing will continue.
Next case, Colony Liquor Mart, CLB and Sons LLC. Christopher Bassista, Managing Member, Inspector Mark A. Mucklebauer. There's no restrictions on this license. This is a transfer. Currently, R. Kapoor, Managing Member on behalf of Nadia LLC, trading as Colony Liquor Mart, 3259A, Solomon's Island Road, Edgewater, Maryland, 21037. This is a Class A beer, wine, and liquor. Beer, wine with spirit tasting and Sunday privileges. Anyone wishing to testify for or against, please come forward, stand up, and raise your right hands, please. Okay, do you solemnly declare under the and affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, please state your name and address for the record.
Christopher Basista, 400 Kirby Parkway, Fort Washington, Maryland, 20744.
Thank you very much. You can have a seat. Mr. Fraley.
All right, counsel, if you could give us your name and address for the record, please.
Eugene Mark, 4614 Roxbury Drive, Bethesda, Maryland, 20814. Attorney for CLB and Sons LLC, doing business as Colony Liquor Mart.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mark. We'll turn it over to you then to present your client's case. You can do so by way of proffer, testimony, or a combination of both, but go ahead and proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Basista, are you the managing sole member of CLB and Sons LLC?
Yes.
And do you plan to work full-time on the licensed premises?
Yes.
Have you ever held an alcoholic beverage license?
No.
Okay, this is your first.
My first.
Do you have any financial interest in any other business that has an alcoholic beverage license?
No.
Have you read and do you agree to obey the rules and regulations covering the sale of alcoholic beverages in Anne Arundel County?
Yes.
Have you been convicted of any felony or been found guilty of any offense against the laws of the United States?
No.
Have you ever been guilty of violating the laws governing the sale of any alcoholic beverage?
No.
How old do you have to be to buy alcoholic beverages?
21.
And how old do you have to be to serve alcoholic beverages?
18.
And in regards to operating a liquor store, how old does a package clerk have to be?
Oh, that's very clear now. 16, but I'm carding everybody after.
Okay. Will you ask for identification for anyone who looks younger than 35 years of age?
Definitely.
Okay. And have you completed an alcohol awareness training program?
Yes.
Okay. What are the 6 forms of acceptable ID?
You have the state-issued driver's license, a state-issued ID, I call it a walker's license, military ID, immigration card, passport, and then the new electronic app ID.
I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any questions of Mr. Marker's client?
No questions.
Commissioner Duffy, any questions?
No question.
Commissioner Snoops? Mr. Mark, anything you'd like to add?
No, just asking the liquor board to approve the transfer of the application.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we grant that motion, if you would, that we grant the license, transfer the license, and ask for a second.
I'll second the motion.
Motion is second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion is carried. Congratulations.
Chairman,
Good luck.
Commissioners.
Very good. You're dismissed. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Next case, Bill's Lounge and Liquors. Bill's Lounge and...
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much. Anyone wishing to testify for or against, please come forward, remain standing, and raise your right hands. Okay, anyone wishing to testify, raise your right hand, please. Okay, do you solemnly declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury and that testimony that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, please state your name and address for the record.
William Tuning Jr., 912 Hillcrest Road, Hanover, Maryland, 21076.
Thank you, Mr. Tuning. Sir?
How much is it? 2303 Sycamore Place, Hanover, Maryland, 21076.
Okay, I'll ask the attorneys to identify themselves, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Richard Bittner, and I represent William Chuney, the applicant.
And good evening, Edward Middlebrooks, that's Middlebro, cast on behalf of Mr. Tuning as well.
And good evening, Brian Lyman, Lyman, on behalf of Mr. Yu, the current licensee, or maybe current licensee.
Okay. You can have a seat. Thank you. Mr. Praley.
All right, thank you, Chief Inspector Harris. Mr. Bittner, Mr. Middlebrooks, we'll turn it over to you. You can present this application to the board by way of proper testimony or a combination of both. We'll let you get right into it.
Thank you, Mr. Praley. Initially, if I may, by way of opening statement, this is an application on behalf of William P. Cuney, Jr., doing business as Bill's Lounge and Liquors, LLC, plural S. It's an application for a transfer, but he's making as the power of attorney for the current licensee by virtue of a lease that the current landlord, the Tuning Revocable Family Trust, had with Mr. Yu that expired on June the 30th. So pursuant to the power vested in Mr. Cuney individually under the lease agreement where he was delegated the power of attorney to effectuate a transfer in the event that the lease expired, which it did on June the 30th. So that's the basis of our proceeding here today. Housekeeping-wise, I would ask that our application that we filed on June the 3rd and Exhibits A through K be admitted for the purposes of the hearing, be formed part of the record. We also supplemented on July the 3rd, on July the 1st, a floor plan. And I'd ask that that be admitted and made part of the record.
Absolutely.
Now, thank you. Now, I'm not quite clear what posture Mr. Yu and Mr. Lehman are here in. If they have some objection to this transfer, I think it would be, in terms of procedural, that they make that objection first. If they have a valid objection, it's possible the board may entertain it and the application may not go forward. So I think it will put the cart before the horse that we present our transfer application and then they present their objection. Certainly, once we present our application, if they have any further objection, I think they would have leave to proceed, but they're here, and I'm not sure in what capacity.
Sure. And Mr. Lyman, are you planning on questioning witnesses that Mr. Bittner may put on, or do you just want to make a general objection to the transfer noted?
I would like to note for the record that we have sent several letters to the Liquor Board noting our objections to the transfer of this liquor license. There is no deal in place to transfer the license willingly by Mr. Yu. Mr. Yu believes that the power of attorney that may or may not have been granted in the lease that he signed 15-plus years ago has expired by virtue of its own terms, that the tenancy is over with. He has vacated the premises. He is not in breach of that lease as of the vacation of the premises. And he, I believe, as of this afternoon, has returned the actual physical liquor license to the Liquor Board staff. And I would just note that if the Liquor Board staff has that license in its possession, that it note that for the record.
Yeah, and my understanding is that was returned this afternoon.
Yes, sir.
Right, and
Okay.
I don't think there's any objection over any of that. But
furthermore, I note for the record that Mr. Yu did not, in fact, sign or assent to the transfer on the rear of the license, which is the board's tradition in an instance like this where a transfer of a license has been requested by another party. The reason for the objection is that Mr. Yu does not have a deal in place to compensate him for his trade name, which he believes is going to be usurped by the applicants who are advertising already, reopening Bill's Liquors under original management on the outside of their premises. And he believes that he's owed compensation for the goodwill and going concern value of his business. And Mr. Tuning, his landlord, nor the LLC applicant has been willing to engage in any further settlement discussions in reference to, a voluntary transfer of the license. And so we're here to note that objection and establish that on the record.
sure, that's noted. We'll overrule it. We'll proceed forward with the transfer. Sounds like it's something that might go to a circuit court judge at a later date. For tonight's purposes, we'll proceed forward with the transfer application.
Thank you. By way of proffer, the application reflects that Mr. Tuning Jr. is a fit and proper person to hold the license. He's a person of good moral character. He has no disqualifying criminal offenses. He's a resident of Anne Arundel County. He's a citizen. He's a voter, even though those prerequisites no longer apply. He is the sole owner-operator of Bill's Lounge Liquors, plural. On that note, this other name is not the same. So, the transfer has been authorized and approved by the landlord, the Tuning Family Trust. Mr. Tuning Jr. is the sole member of the LLC. You have in the application package the authorizing resolution from the Family Trust, authorizing resolutions from Bill's Lounge Liquors, LLC, authorizing Mr. Tuning to make this application. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this is the exact type of application, the exact type of procedure that was contemplated by the lease that the Hughes entered into. There is no requirement, absolutely no requirement in Maryland law, once a lease expires, absent a provision in the lease that the tenant receives compensation for goodwill, its name, whatever. That simply is not the law. Mr. Middlebrooks has the site there. We'd be happy to give it to you in just a moment. There is no obligation for a landlord when a lease expires to renegotiate the lease. They don't have to give a reason why they don't want the tenant to stay. What is advanced here, quite candidly, Mr. Chair, members of the board, by Mr. Yu is frivolous. There's no case law been cited. It's just frivolous. It's a violation of his contractual obligations. He operated, so the record is complete, he operated the license in violation of the lease agreements. He didn't have a bar in there. He's indebted, and this is all a matter for circuit court perhaps later on, but he's indebted to the landlord for damages of the property. There's a window broken, a number of refrigerators. So you've made the appropriate decision to allow the transfer to proceed. I'd ask that you approve it. Mr. Tuning will be completing alcohol awareness tips TAMs. He'll be submitting all the collateral licenses, health department. He has most of them, but we expect we'll have those to you quite promptly. So thank you, and we'd ask you to approve the license. Mr. Tuning, you've heard what I've had to say. Is what I've proffered to the board all true and correct?
Yes, sir.
He's happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bisner. Mr. Chairman, any questions?
I don't have any questions.
Commissioner Duffy, any questions?
Yes, Mr. Bender, I would just like to know from you, Mr. Tuning, what was the date of the lease to expire? Is there a date?
June the 30th, Commissioner, it expired, and the parties the tenant vacated the premises on June the 30th.
Was that the original date?
That was the date after the last extension. So yes, that was the date.
So a date was established for the 30th of June in 22.
Correct. There was a lease that established that. Then there was a 5-year, I believe, extension that was granted, fixing the same date. So that June the 30th has been the date since the parties entered into the lease.
Okay.
10 years ago.
Right, this last lease, yes, there was a previous lease as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I have no additional questions.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Snoops, any questions?
I have no questions.
All right. Mr. Bittner, anything you want to add?
Chesapeake Bank versus Monroe Muffler, 166 Maryland Ave, 695, case from 2006, holds that there is no requirement for a landlord to negotiate with a tenant unless it's contractually recited. Advanced Telecom, 224 Maryland Ave, 164, 2015, speaks to the agreement, speaks to the same, that unless there's an agreement to renegotiate, to pay good faith, to pay some value to the tenant, there's no obligation on the part of the landlord to do so. Yim LLC versus Tuzier, have an Atlantic Third site, 63, Atlantic Third, 1078, has, strike that. That's all I'll cite at this time.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Middlebrooks, I believe, has something.
Yeah, I just, because there's an issue of good faith in negotiation raised up. There's case law, even where the parties would contractually say we would agree to negotiate in good faith. The court has said that is an unenforceable, wide open agreement, and we will not enforce that. That was an advanced telecom. I thought that was important to know. No requirement, even in a contract where you have it written, we will negotiate in good faith. The court said that's unenforceable, it's too vague, too broad, and we will not enforce it. And that is the site we quoted.
Excellent.
Thank you. That's just what I'm saying.
Thank you, and maybe those are issues that a circuit court judge has to address at some point.
We just addressed them.
For tonight's purposes, the board's only going to consider whether or not Mr. Tuning is a fit and proper person to hold a license. If there is an issue with having to sign the back of a license in order to finalize a transfer, should this board grant the transfer, that may be something that a circuit court judge can negotiate and deal with in good faith with you all as well. So with that, I will turn it over to the chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve the transfer, and I look for a second.
I second the motion to approve it.
All those, further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion is carried. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. May we
Thank you.
be excused?
Can I say hi to Wayne Harris sitting down there? I haven't a chance to say hi to him.
Be awful quiet there for a while.
The next case is the PWI Deli and Convenience Store, Dorsey Square LLC, Ken Joshi, managing member, Sandy Patel, member, Epic Patel, member. This is a new license, 1272 Stony Run Road, Hanover, Maryland, 21076. It's a Class A, beer, wine, and liquor, and Sunday license. Anyone wishing to testify, please remain standing. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury and the testimony that you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Yes.
Okay, please state your name and addresses for the record. We'll
Yeah,
start.
Gerald Patnode, 497 Heritage Drive, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania.
Stacy Beers, 200 Armstrong Lane, Pasadena, Maryland.
Kinjal Joshi, 8765 Stonehouse Drive, Ellicott City, Maryland, 21043.
Sandeep Patel, 10217 Deep Skies Drive, Laurel, Maryland.
Vivek Patel, 10217 Deep Skies Drive, Laurel, Maryland.
Okay, thank you. You can all have a seat.
Thank you.
Mr. Fraley?
All right. Mr. Bittner, good to see you again. We'll turn it over to you. You can present your client's case by way of testimony proper or combination of both.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fraley. My name is Richard Bittner. I represent the applicants, Dorsey Square LLC, BWI Deli and Convenience Store, Kinji Joshi, Sandeep Patel, and Vitek Patel. We've all met, father and son.
Yeah, right back there, just
Uncle.
one of the partner
So,
friends.
family operation here. Miss Stacy Haney Beers is here. She represents the landlord. And of course, Dr. Patnode, he's done a study on the need of this license to accommodate the public. So initially, if I may, I'd like to move in the application along with our exhibits titled A through J, make them part of the record.
Those will be admitted.
And also, if I may, I'd like to submit an additional 49 signatures in support of the granting of the license. I apologize, Mr. Chairman, that I don't have copies. I just received those today. And I'd ask that they be admitted.
Those will be accepted and admitted.
When June the 21st, we forwarded to the board the site survey, the site plan completed by Terrain Incorporated, and I'd ask that that be admitted, made part of the record.
Yes, sir.
We submitted May the 20th, a floor plan. I'm sorry, I got it. We don't need to republish that. And finally, Dr. Patnode's report that was submitted on June the 22nd, I believe. I'd ask that that be admitted.
That will also be admitted, Mr. Bittner.
I'd ask that the board make a finding that Dr. Patnud is a qualified expert. His CV is attached to the report. He's testified, I believe, the board will recall numerous times, been qualified as an expert in the area of demographic studies for the need to accommodate alcoholic beverage off-sale licenses. And I'd ask that his report and any testimony he provides be admitted under the expert testimony designation.
It will be. Dr. Patnode will be noted as an expert, can testify and make opinions, and his report will also be accepted.
Now, if I may at the outset, the location of the proposed license, 1272 Stony Run Road, has been a convenience store since about 1971. Miss Haney Beers is...
From our family, but before that, the 1940s.
Thank you. Thank you. It's used as a convenience store, grocery store, deli, food, going back some 80 years. Miss Haney Beers would tell you that her family had it from about 1973 to 1999. They often received requests to serve alcohol. Many people during that time, even back then, came in looking for off-sale alcoholic beverages. And the family just made a decision then, even though that there was a demand, that they didn't want to have an alcoholic beverage license. Is that right, ma'am?
Primarily because all of my siblings were all underage, along with myself. We all worked in the store. From the time we could reach the counter, we were making sandwiches and serving the customers, and we were all just too young.
Now, what has occurred since then, as the applicants here have made a decision to invest in Anne Arundel County, invest in the BWI development area by investing some $200,000 into this establishment, modernizing the kitchen, modernizing the floor plan, all of the physical plant. They will be full-time operators, along with, they believe, 2 other additional full-time employees and 2 part-time employees. They've all been alcohol awareness certified, or will be completing that next week. Is that right, gentlemen?
We already did.
Already done it.
We will provide the certificate by tomorrow, yeah.
Thank you. They also have contracted to hire, to purchase cash registers that have an ID scanner that they intend to use with regularity. They also understand the ID scanner through the Maryland lottery system that they'll have there.
That's true, yeah.
So they're trained in alcohol awareness identification, and they also have extensive retail experience. Not in the retail alcohol business. Mr. Patel was involved in a restaurant several years ago that had a bar and in-service, so he understands the importance of carding and not over-serving. All of them understand the importance of carding because they've had to deal with tobacco issues. Their other convenience stores are subject to tobacco stings. So they understand what their obligations are in terms of not selling to minors. Now, what most respectfully, and Dr. Patnud's report bears this out, what is most unique and interesting about this license is it comes to you not in what often is a traditional way where there's been an expansion of residences in the county, so there's more people living in a particular area. We have that here. There's a number of new homes in the area. But what really is happened, what really has blossomed, is the development of the BWI airport area. This proposed location sits literally, members of the board, right in the middle. It's right across the street from the rental car pickup and return. It's within walking distance of the Amazon, Maryland Department of Transportation. And Dr. Patnud, in his report, reflects that there's some 25,000 workers, 15,000 in the support industries in the area, Amtrak, the hotels, 10,000 itself who are badged at BWI Airport, who traverse this area quite regularly. Additionally, there's 52,000 travelers who come in to BWI, and he equates that to the buying power of 23,000 households. That is a tremendously underserved area and clientele. You can see by the petitions of persons who come in, they would like to have the opportunity to purchase alcoholic beverages. My clients would tell you that daily someone on their way to the hotel stops in, wants to load up the room with goodies for the family. They can't get a six-pack of beer or a bottle of wine. That happens every day. Is that right, gentlemen?
That's right.
Now, additionally, what they've identified, because of where they are right across from the rental car pickup and drop-off, that they believe that they're going to have a strong demand from the tourist element that's coming. They've reached out, they've spoken and made preliminary inquiries with a number of Maryland-centric products, craft beers, as well as foodstuffs, Old Bay, T-shirts, that type of thing. So they fully expect that they're going to have a significant presence in their store for the tourist industry, for the tourists that come by every day. There's no other off-sale licensed establishment nearby. As the crow flies, the closest is about 3 miles. But as the car drives, it's about 15 minutes. There's no competition nearby, but there's a vastly underserved community seeking an accommodation. At this point, I would ask preliminarily any questions of the applicants. They're all fit and proper person. They've all passed their criminal background check. I've been appointed as the resident agent for the purposes of any summons that are filed, and they're happy to entertain any questions. Sure.
Mr. Chairman, any questions?
I don't see the menu here. We'll get it now. It's online.
We do have
also.
a website too, sir.
No, I have no questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Duffy.
I have no questions.
Thank you.
Commissioner Snoops, any questions? Mr. Bittner, do you have more to add?
Just very briefly for the record purposes, Dr. Patnute, is there anything you want to amplify?
I don't know why you needed me here. You covered all the bases, but yeah, except I calculate there's probably about $11 million worth of alcoholic beverage business in this place. It's to be honest with you, when Mr. Bittner asked me to look at this thing, I looked at the initial population, and there were 991 people living within 5 minutes. And I said, "You're crazy." And then I realized where it was. And it's 70,000 people there every day.
Mr. Chairman, any questions of Dr. Patnute?
No questions.
Commissioner Duffy.
In reference to your survey, was there any indications of safety, welfare in reference to
This is
the community?
a well-established commercial area. It's well maintained. I see no issues whatsoever here.
Okay. Well, I understand that based upon Mr. Bittner explanation, there is no competition whatsoever
There's
within
nothing
the community.
there's nothing within 2.5 miles.
Okay.
Typically, I talk about a 5-minute and a 10-minute drive to
Yes.
market. Within the 5-minute drive time, there's absolutely nothing. Within the 10-minute drive time, you have several licenses, but they're outside this commercial area for the most part. And there's sufficient alcoholic beverage sales that none of them are going to be burdened by an additional license in this particular area. They're simply not in the same marketplace.
And how's the traffic in reference to the traffic area?
Exactly.
Nothing? Okay. I have no additional question.
Thank you, Commissioner Duffy. Commissioner Snoops, any questions? I have no questions. All right. Mr. Bittner, anything you'd like to add?
No, thank you. We'd ask you to approve of the application as requested.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'll go ahead and do that, that we approve the license for BWI Deli and Convenience Store, and I look for a second.
Second.
Seen second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carried. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you both, yeah, we appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you.
That's it.
Glad we were able to
Thank you.
make up time in the end.
There you go. All right, seeing no other business, the hearing is now adjourned.
Very good. Thank you, good evening.
Thank you.